Hey, so I was finishing up one video, and at the end of it, I didn't open this PR, but it's related to that video. And so one of the things that I really miss as someone that does quite a lot of side projects and make little demos for the newsletter I write and for YouTube and all that kind of stuff, is that I don't have anybody to ask for code review. If you're part of an open source project, or when you're at work, of course, your work goes through code review, and oftentimes really nice stuff pops up in the process of code review, like something you didn't think about, something another person might have already had experience with, and they could give you guidance and say hey, you know what, there's actually a different way we could do this, or I've encountered this before and actually ran into this other problem and I ended up fixing it like this. And and together you just make better software in the end of the day. It's also nice to have that collaborative experience, right? And so that is something that I've missed, because oftentimes I write something and I wonder to myself, I wonder if this is the best way to do it, or not necessarily that there's a better way, but if there's other ways of doing it that I might not have considered, all that kind of stuff. And there is this AI tool called Coderabbit. And basically, I think it can do more things, but one of the things that I know it from is that you can give it access to a repository. I know it can do GitLab and GitHub. I don't know which other things. I also see here that there's an extension for VS Code, Cursor, Windsurf. So basically any VS Code based thing. Not exactly sure what it does in the IDE, but that is not what this video is about. But basically you can give it access to your code base, and then when you open a pull request, it does a code review for you. Now, there's all kinds of stuff you can set here. There's profiles, there's a chill profile, assertive profile, there's auto review stuff, there's tools, there's finishing touches, all kinds of stuff. I haven't gone through this, and I'm not going to talk about that now. I'll probably make a separate video on that because I want to dig into all of this. But basically what I did is I have this repository called Web Platform Feature of the Week, and that goes along with the newsletter and then the videos. So any code demos and stuff like that I make, I put in here. And the thing is, when I make these, oftentimes I'm just trying to explain a specific web platform feature or something like that. And so I'll throw something together, and I don't always put in all the effort and think about every detail, and kind of there's nobody reviewing the code, of course, and so sometimes I miss stuff. Also, I'm human as everybody else, and we all forget things, we miss things, we're all constantly learning, we're trying new stuff, all this kind of stuff. So I thought, in the end of the day, the code that I put here, I do want it to be good. Code that I put anywhere, I really want it to be good, and as good as it can be. And if I can also learn out of the process, then that's even better. So I figured, with this latest pull request that I opened on GitHub, I'm going to enable Coderabbit and just see what happens. I had no real expectation of what exactly this was going to be or what I'm going to get out of it, but I was curious. Maybe it can just mention some things that I just overlooked or anything like that. Wow, I don't know if this was a fluke or if this is the kind of quality. By the way, I'm also on the free tier at the moment, so I'm not paying for this yet or anything like that. But what I got out of this, just with basically the vanilla, so to speak, configuration and settings and everything, I'm kind of blown away. And I'm going to go through it right now, but I'm really impressed with what this does. So let's have a look. So basically, and I don't even have to explain what the heck this pull request does, because that's one of the things it does. But it did another thing. So I had this as my example because it's just for me, right? I'm nobody else can see this. But then it added to mine, and it said, well, this actually introduces a dismissible alert banner with persistence across visits. It adds an open trivia widget that lists categories, fetches a question, reveals the answer on demand. It implemented a baseline CSS reset, added new styles for the alert banners and TriviaLat, included accessibility utility for visually hidden content, provided a new sample page that showcases components and the interactions. Super nice. This is all true. It's very simple, actually, but it makes it sound very impressive. But then it goes on, and it actually does a walkthrough, and it says it adds a new static page, wiring two web components, those two, with supporting CSS. The alert banner component manages show, hide, and persistence of dismissed banners via local storage. The open trivia component fetches categories and questions from open trivia DB, which is correct. Caches categories and session storage, correct, and renders the interactive UI, correct. And this edition of the newsletter was about local storage and session storage. But then it did this thing where it shows the files. So these are the web components, and then a short summary about that. These are the new style sheets and summary about that, and the HTML scaffold and some stuff about that. And then it added these two sequence diagrams, and I'm assuming this is Mermaid. But I mean, adding this to, for example, a README file that I put inside the root directory, because this has its own little directory here. If we go over to the files called storage, if I put those in a README with some of the information that's in here, if somebody else stumbles upon this, and when I link to this, like from the newsletter and from the YouTube video and wherever else, this will be extremely useful. If we click here, so it opens it really big, you can see it basically. It's a user flow. So we have an index, a define, and attaches a component, the alert banner, that reads the alert banner, disable banner. So this is the key that it uses to read from local storage. It gets a list of dismissed IDs. It shows non-dismissed alert banner main, so things with this class. And then there you click on the dismiss button that writes an update to disable banners and local storage. It removes the dismiss banner from the DOM. It's not perfect or super, but it's intuitive and it's useful, and it added that in. Here GitHub messed up. Let me just refresh, because this one was fine when I loaded it the first time. There we go. And this one's more complex. That's the trivia one. And again, you can see define and attach the open trivia, load cache categories. If there's a cache miss, then it goes to the DB and it gets it from the API, gets the categories or cache, and then it caches the categories, render the category buttons, click a category, it gets it. I mean, this is really cool. This is really useful. And I can, of course, use this. I didn't know that you got all these fancy things now these days also, but really, really cool. And you can, I guess this refreshes and you can navigate around. Really cool. Then it goes on and it says estimated code view. Then you wrote a little poem, which is really weird. I'm not sure why I did that, but I thump my paws on freshly spun CSS snow. A banner pops, then softly off it goes. Trivia sprouts like clover after rain. Questions nibble gently at my brain. Cached carrots, categories, line the trail, hop, click, reveal the answers in the hay. Alrighty then, if you insist. Then it talks finishing touches, so I guess this is potentially stuff that I could add. So create a PR with unit test, post copyable unit test in a comment. Okay, I guess this is something that it could still do. Then there's some tips for it, but this is basically how to use Coderabbit. And then here's some good stuff. So now, as mentioned, this is a demo for the newsletter. So of course, I didn't go spend that much time on thinking about all the details. Some stuff I missed. Again, being human, I also just forgot some stuff, overlooked some stuff. But over and above those things that it highlighted, it also made some good things, that some stuff that I've been wondering about. And this is what I'm talking about, this whole review thing where you have something else in this case, someone else going through the code. It has a different set of eyes, a different set of firing data, neurons, whatever. But let's have a look at this. So here's some nitpicking comments, right? So it's talking about the reset. This one, I don't agree with. Basically, it says only margin block end is reset. Many elements will retain default top margins, leading to inconsistent spacing. So it says prefer resetting both start and end and then opt into margins explicitly. I wouldn't necessarily say no to this. So it's suggesting just blanketly for all of these setting margin to 0, where currently the reset only resets the bottom margins to 0. I don't necessarily agree that this is better, so I'm going to not apply this thing. This one is really cool. It says provide or prefer dynamic viewport units to avoid mobile browser UI causing layout jumps. Now, I still need to make a video about this, but so you get viewport height, so viewport units, but then you also get these DVB. And basically what this does is, like sometimes if you on a mobile device, sometimes some of the browser UI like goes away and comes back. And then what sometimes happens is some of your UI gets lost behind the browser Chrome that like shows up. And what these DVB units, for example, does is it makes it dynamic so that it will adjust and it'll always show everything that you intended for it to show. So the cool thing, and one of the reasons why, like, funny enough, a friend of mine asked on LinkedIn, I think once, like, why aren't we just always using these days? And then another friend said, like, well, maybe because Firefox don't support it yet. I think that's still the case. But the cool thing that it's suggesting here is you could set min block size to 100 dVB and then have 100 VH, just normal viewport height, as a fallback. I think this is really cool, and I'm definitely going to update my resets to use this. This is really nice. And then I think for the longest time, I might have actually had, I haven't double checked this, so I'm going to double check it now, but I might have used the wrong casing here, optimize legibility. So it's saying the L in legibility should be a capital L. It's saying, oh yeah, use canonical casing for text rendering value. It says the canonical value is optimize legibility with the capital L, but apparently browsers are lenient. But if you do this, then it avoids linter noise and improves readability. So, I mean, we can have a real quick look what it says here. And indeed, here it's capital L. So I don't know if at some point maybe it was lowercase. Doesn't say anything there. Let's do a quick find here. Ooh, there's a lot of... Oh, hold up. What if I do match case and lowercase? Nope. So that's been wrong. So it's been wrong all along. So what it's saying here, I don't think that's quite accurate, but this is definitely accurate. So, okay, moving on. Nice catch. Okay, here's just talking about, like, I'm using CSS nesting. So it's just saying, like, make sure the browsers you're targeting support it. Otherwise, you might want to do this, not use nesting, essentially. Fair. This is really cool, and this is something that I've wondered about. So one of the things is, for example, a constructor can't do any async stuff, and you also shouldn't do async stuff inside a constructor. I'm not doing that here, but what it's also saying is, because if you think about it, whenever a class is instantiated, the constructor is called. But maybe me and other people might have just been lucky, and that if they've called any functions or done any like kind of work that involves getting things from the DOM, and these things have worked consistently, maybe you're just lucky. Maybe you're deferring your scripts or something. I don't know. I mean, I've been doing it like this, and I've always wondered, is it the best place to do that? Because, for example, there's this other pattern that I often use, that we also often use at Factorial, is you have this function called getElements, and it basically gets all, it sets a bunch of properties on an object that is a bunch of the DOM elements that you're going to use throughout the code more than once. So then you get an object that you can destructure the pieces out of whenever you need it. But you have the function, and then in the constructor, you would set this.elements equals this.getElements. And so you do it in the constructor. Never been bitten by this, but it is true. I think, maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments. But I do think that what it's saying here is true. It says querying children and attaching listeners in the constructor can be fragile. So it's saying move initialization to connected callback. So light DOM is parsed and the element is in the document. So again, if you're adding stuff through shadow DOM, you're probably much safer. But if you're getting stuff the light DOM, interesting that it even refers to it like that. Not super surprised, but still. So it's saying, instead of doing this.show banners inside the constructor, do it in connected callback. And connected callback is just a lifecycle event that's called when your component is actually mounted in the DOM. So I'm definitely going to do this because I don't see anything negative here, and I can only see positives here in terms of it being less fragile. And I think it calls this out twice. Then it talks here again about CSS nesting. It's cool for my purposes here. It's fine. I'm going to continue using that. Here, I've missed setting type button, which may or may not be a problem, but I don't know how I missed that because I always put type equals button, but this time I forgot. It called it out and I can fix it. Then for the Opian trivia, here it's talking about, I still need to read into this a little bit more. I think I know what it means, and it might be because I'm doing this in the constructor as opposed to maybe on connected callback or something like that. But it's saying if the element is reinstantiated or reconnected, calling add event listeners again could stack up duplicate listeners. So adding a flag and then setting the flag, and if it's set, then you don't do it again. Something that I want to definitely check into. This is also really cool because I've always been a little unsure about these errors that I'm throwing and whether I'm doing this in the best possible way, but I've never known like how to look up, who to ask, and I know about this cause. And so what this does is it does essentially what I did before, but now it takes the error that I got over here and it sets it as the cause, the reason why the error happened, instead of what I was doing here, which is just a string that I'm getting just the message out of the error. I reckon this is much nicer. If you have different thoughts, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to know. Again, here in the JavaScript, I forgot to set the buttons type to button, and it says it could cause accidental form submission. That wouldn't have happened in this case, but really cool. Here's another thing, and I thought about this, and I actually meant to do it, but again, like I said, this was just a demo, so I wasn't really paying too much attention, and I forgot to do it. But one of the things that happens is you have a list of categories on the left. When you click on one of the categories, it loads a question. But initially, there's nothing in the, let's call it, in the right main content area. So it's actually saying, hey, announce updates and improve reveal behavior. So announce dynamic content via ARIA Live, disable the reveal button after use, focus the revealed answer, and wire ARIA controls and expanded. Maybe not all of this stuff, but I was definitely thinking about this ARIA Live, and it's nice that it's using polite. ARIA expanded, so that is when I click show answer. So I actually think this is probably a good idea, but this is ugly when they implemented it. If I had to, and I'm probably going to build on this because it's actually kind of nice. If I build on this, I would actually make it maybe a disclosure widget or something like that, in which case, like a detailed summary kind of thing. So the summary would be the question, and then the details would be the answer. So, but this is super cool that it picked this up. It's accessibility stuff, really. Minor alley, I don't know if it's a minor accessibility thing. I also don't know if I'll say it's major, but the fact that it picked it up and called it out, super. Love it. And then it's wiring up what controls what, like this thing shows this thing. And that's totally true because I'm not using something, like I said, like, for example, a summary details component or HTML element. So I should take care of these things myself now because I'm a building a custom component, which I wouldn't do if I built this for real. Super nice. Love that it picked up all of those things. Here's a bunch of stuff just like commits and the files that it did and some additional comments, which I haven't even looked at. It says a solid modern baseline reset. So index relation looks good to me. Module wiring looks correct. Custom element registration looks good. Then it goes into some more stuff here. This one, I like what it says. It says use focus visible for better keyboard UX and keep focus outlines accessible. I can see why it's saying what it's saying, but also it can't see this visually, so it's kind of missing what I'm actually doing here. So this one I'm going to kind of disregard, but the fact that it's again bringing up this accessibility thing, this UX thing, I really like the fact that it's doing that. I'm not entirely sure why focus within, because I could imagine that with the drop-down menu there, yes, I would potentially see this being useful, but in this use case where it's just a button and the state is when you hover over it or it focuses, then basically it hides the border and it shows the outline instead. So you have this like growing thing. Something to think about, but I don't think focus within, I don't see that being relevant here. Again, let me know in the comments if you disagree. So, announce banner to assistive technologies. Again, here, ARIA Live Polite. The one thing here is, I think here it's telling me to do it in the HTML, but then earlier it was telling me to do it within the JavaScript. So, here's where you can see where it's kind of missing that it's forgetting about something it mentioned earlier. I would probably do it like this instead. Wait, this is different. This is the banner. Sorry. There was talking about the other one. So here's basically saying that you should put role status ARIA Live Polite on this. Role status, I totally agree. ARIA Live Polite, I guess yes, because it's initially hidden and then shown. Good catch, Coderabbit. Here it's mentioning a potential issue. This totally is an issue. This is a complete F-up from my side. So it's saying you're storing an object that has a property called disabled banners with an array, but then later I treat the parse storage as an array and call includes, which will throw. Yes, you are correct. This is a bug. So, and it basically here suggests to me, here it's interesting where it says, so here I return null, so it says instead return an empty array. Not entirely sure. I'll have to read over this code, but the essence of it, the fact that I am screwing up here is, it is correct. I think there's also a thing which it shows here, but it talks about a bit later. This is pretty cool. This is interesting. So, again, it doesn't know about that little something in my CSS here. It probably knows about it, but maybe it didn't make the connection. So basically what it's saying here is checking event.target.tag name equals button will miss clicks on children within the button, such as the SVG and the span. That is correct. That is why I have generally, when I have a button and I'm going to have an SVG inside of it, I've generally put inside the SVG a thing that says pointer events none. So then that avoids pointer events being triggered from clicks on that SVG. Now, what it's suggesting is you don't have to bother with that. What I could instead look at doing is to do closest, use this closest. And interestingly, I think here I learned something new / knew this existed, but completely forgot. This is a thing that I used a lot back in the days with jQuery, where you could do this whole thing where you find the closest that, and it would kind of walk up the tree until it finds the thing that matches a certain class or ID or whatever the case may be. And I completely forgot that we can do this. So I just have to read up on this again, but this is probably, or this is the way I will, if this ends up being correct, which at first glance and intuition suggests to me, yes, this sounds correct to me, this is what I will do in future, because maybe you can't always set that pointer events thing on the SVG. Or maybe there's something else, like it said, some other things that might trigger click events. And then because the click didn't come from the button, but something inside the button, now you're not getting the click events and your code becomes fragile again. Really cool. Love it. So let's move on. And then here again, it talks about the fact that I'm calling this .load categories. Don't avoid async work. So I'm not directly doing, because as you can see, I'm not awaiting the result of this inside the constructor, but it is correct in saying that this function is an async function. That is true. I'm not awaiting its result inside the constructor. I'm kind of just firing it and forgetting it. But moving that to connected callback again would probably be better. It's saying prefer that for DOM and network side effects. So it's kind of like use effect in React, the whole side effects thing. So I agree with that. And this is kind of like in use effect in React. More often than not, you'll have a return function at the end that would do cleanup. And so you could technically use disconnected callback to do the same kind of thing, like using a board controller on a fetch and canceling the fetch if the component is unmounted before the fetch is finished. Really cool. Again, like I say, this is the kind of stuff I miss from having code reviews on all these things. So dig it. Let's load this one in. So, I totally agree here, and I mentioned this in the video, that you would want to more gracefully handle failures. You might also want your storage not to just, if you need your local storage to persist beyond, or let me get my words straight. If you can't lose what you're putting in local storage, you should definitely sync that off to a more persistent storage, like a database or something that's on a server somewhere in the cloud, blah, blah, blah. You shouldn't rely on something always being in local storage, because many things can happen to a browser, and also users can clear storage. So you should definitely not put stuff in there that's sensitive, and you shouldn't put stuff in there that you don't want to lose. Like if you're storing entire articles of somebody that they've written there, and that's the only place they are, woof, you're going to have some angry users if their storage goes missing. So it's basically suggesting some ideas here. I need to read through this still, but the basic idea, I'm not necessarily saying it's code suggestion is what I would do. It's basically corrupt or inaccessible storage, clear and fall back to the network. See what I mean? Fall back to the network. I agree with that. Not entirely sure what's happening here, but I will check it out and see what it suggests there. But really cool, like that. So add error handling and load categories to keep the UI responsive on failures. So again, this is network and storage error bubble out of this method and can result in an unhandled rejection, especially when calls from the constructor. So again, there's quite a lot that it's talking about here, so I have to read over this. But the fact that it's brought this to my attention is really nice, even if maybe I don't end up doing the exact code, what it's saying here, or I might say, in this case, actually, there's something else you don't know about, so this is actually fine. But this gets me thinking and reconsidering what I've done here. And of course, as mentioned, I haven't paid as close attention to this as I would normally, because this isn't meant to go to production or anything like that, right? The other thing that's interesting, it's also added a little comment here. I don't think that's necessary, because it's pretty clear that the reason why you would set inner HTML to an empty string is probably to clear out whatever you had before. So it might be an unnecessary comment there, but interesting. There's another one that's really cool. So this is cool, and I was actually going to do this. I had an if response code equals 5, because that is one of the response codes that the API will send back if you are making too many requests. So you also get a 429 HTTP error, but it also sends you a response code that you can handle instead of just having an error being thrown. So it's basically talking here about handling the different response codes. So it's saying OpenTrivia includes response code other than 5. It's 100% correct. It returns, I think, 0 to 5, and each one means different things. And it's calling out a good thing here in that it's saying response code and may return an empty result. Yes, again, didn't quite go into detail here, but I like this because it reminds me, makes me think of it. Oh, but yeah, maybe I should just do this. Because again, when I put code out here, and I know other people might be looking at it because I'm referencing it from a newsletter or blah, 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 I really want to make sure the code is good. I don't want people to, for example, copy paste something and then stuff goes bleh somewhere and they're like, this guy's code sucks. No, I don't want that. And it's really good. I like it. Let's move on. This is a really nice one. Avoid inner HTML with untrusted remote content. This is very true. And again, I just did this because, first of all, this demo that I made for this was supposed to be a lot simpler. Sorry for another day. But it's suggesting that instead, and basically the reason why I did the inner HTML on the question and the answer is because sometimes it would have escape characters, like an ampersand, it would do and amp, semicolon, and a couple of other ones as well. And so to just have it display correctly, I was just like, inner HTML, cool. Again, this is not going to production. No actual users will be using this. So I didn't worry, but I like what it's suggesting. It's basically saying, hey, you could create this decode HTML function, and then you can just use text content. And what it does here is it uses the DOM parser that's built into the browser. So it's part of the web API. So if we go in the end DOM parser, I've actually looked at this before. It's baseline widely available. So basically, the DOM parser interface provides the ability to parse XML or HTML source code from a string into an actual document object model. So it's not a thing it's made up. I know that this exists. And there's parse from string. And there's parse from string. So again, not making stuff up. And then here it says, let's see. So that gives you a document, and then document.body, and then it gets the text content of it. So I guess what it's saying here is when you do that, it'll render the HTML. So these escape characters will now be rendered, and then the text content you get back will be something you can just display in text content. So you won't have these escape characters anymore. So definitely something I'm going to try out. And that's nice. Then I also don't have to just do this because make problem go away. Want to finish demo. So yeah, very cool. Definitely going to read up about this a little more. I can't remember this one. Toggle category. So it says, yes. Classic mistake. Doing the if not category selections, but category selections is an array, so I should check on the length. I could just say if not category selections.length, and that'll work too. This is more explicit. What's your preference? Let me know in the comments. I would love to know. If the intent is to disable only other buttons except the active button, that's not what I'm doing here. So the reason I'm doing what I'm doing here is basically when you select the category, it makes a request to the API to get a question for this category. And because of the aforementioned rate limiting, you can only make a request every 5 seconds. Now, to avoid somebody clicking a category and then seeing the question like, I don't know, click another one, and then there's some error happening, I first thought maybe you could show a message saying, whoops, you're a little bit too quick. And then, I don't know, have a little counter that counts down 5, 4, 3, 2 like that, or throwing up a modal that prevents them from doing. And I thought, well, just for the demo, just to make problem go away again. Let's just disable all the buttons, set a timeout for the 5 seconds, and then just enable all the category buttons again. So it's just talking about, like, maybe you intended to just toggle the other buttons and not the actual active one. Again, this is not a beautiful UX solution I have here. This was a solution. Again, here it talks about closest, which I've already discussed before. And that is all the stuff it reviewed. I mean, on 6 files and, let me scroll to the top. On 6 files and 483 lines of code added, this is a really thorough, detailed review. And also, again, love these. Definitely going to create a README file and use these in there. Am I going to continue using Coderabbit? Hell yes. Will it always be this thorough and detailed? Maybe, maybe not. The interesting thing is I actually currently have it set to chill, and you can set it to assertive, and it's saying here, assertive profile yields more feedback that may be considered nitpicky. So I'll definitely try it out on one of it and just see how nitpicky it gets, because I like nitpicks, because oftentimes, like, there's a very fine balance with nitpicks. There's a point where it's like, honestly, and then there's a point where it's like, actually, that's a good point. I have a friend, a really good friend of mine. We worked together at Mozilla for a long time, and his code reviews were like one of my highlights of every day, because he did such detailed code reviews. You know who you are, Peter. And I really miss that. I really, really miss that. And maybe this is Peter mode. If it's not assertive, I don't know. I'll try it out. But this was really cool. I really enjoyed this. So if you haven't tried out Coderabbit, give it a shot. I really think it's super good. If you do a lot of stuff by yourself, you don't have anybody to, like, just look over your shoulder or do code reviews, stuff like that, I think this can really fill a gap in a really meaningful way. Again, even if it just makes you think about something again, even if you don't do what Coderabbit suggested, even if you're like, no, actually, I intended to do it like this because blah, 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 bigger context you do not know, because maybe it just sees this PR, blah, 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 whatever the case may be. Even if it just makes you stop and think for a moment, I think that's valuable. So, yeah, big ups to Coderabbit. Have you used it? Let me know. If you're going to try it, let me know once you have. Like, hit me up on Blue Sky, LinkedIn, or in the comments here on YouTube, whatever you prefer. I look forward to hearing from you, and yeah, I'm really excited about this new whole world we're in with all these tools and stuff we have access to now. Again, complicated relationship. There's a lot of stuff that I have very, very strong feelings about in terms of AI and many things, but that's a whole other topic. In terms of the value that I'm getting out of these tools, especially when it comes to code, when it comes to coding and things like this, it's really making me better and making me go faster, and I'm really enjoying making stuff. And that's really what I love. I love making stuff. So yeah, go out there and make stuff and let me know what you make. I love seeing what people make. It's exciting. It's inspiring. So have fun, and I'll speak to you soon. Peace.